Welcome to Mindful Crossroad, where two curious minds explore some of society's most challenging topics. Today, we're diving into the psychology of belief. I'm Roman Ditzenberger, an intelligence analyst with a background in theology, psychology, computer science, and product management. And joining me is my co-host, Terrence.
I'm a decision scientist, student in community psychology, cybersecurity background, project management, as well as a little dabbling here and there in human resources. You may have heard of me before on a few other podcasts.
Just kind of jumping right into it. Belief, it's a massive topic. And I always like to start out with definitions when attacking a topic to kind of help scope and guide the conversation and make sure everyone's on the same page. So, definitions. According to Merriam-Webster, there's three primary meanings. One, a state or habitat of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in some person or thing. Two, something is accepted, considered to be true, or held as an opinion. A tenant, if you would. And three, a conviction of truth, of some statement or the reality of some being or phenomenon, especially when based on examination of evidence. Interestingly, and I think the linguistic background is pretty cool, belief traces back to the Middle English belven and the Old English belthine, meaning to have faith or confidence. And if you go farther back, in German origins, it's Gabelun. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which translates into hold dear.
There we go. So be all the way back to English class. Those are that kind of lineage is profound, and how not just how long belief has lasted, but how long the language has formed and persisted from. And when we're talking about discussing beliefs, especially after we've kind of defined the vast lineage that it has, we also have to look into how these beliefs are formed. So what I'm picking up from what you've described relates really closely to me when I'm thinking about some of the work of a famous community psychologist, Dr. Moose. He talks a lot about how beliefs can be influenced by social context, where if you take a number of individuals who you might call bad eggs and take one good individual, depending on which has the stronger context, typically numbers win, but not always, you would expect that the larger influence would affect the beliefs of the smaller unit. But there are cases where if you put one good person in with a group of people you might consider bad people, however you define that, that one can influence those beliefs. Usually starts from smaller lens, and then we look at Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, again, another community psychology perspective, where we take the shape of how people relate to the world based on various systems. Microsystem being the interrelation between close friends, family, the people in your day-to-day life, and how those can influence your strongly held beliefs, all the way up to the exosystem, where we start looking at how do governments and culture at large start to influence belief structures over the course of time, ultimately leading into our macrosystem and chronosystem, where we evaluate the change of societies over a timeline.
Yeah. There's definitely a huge thing with timeline, and things with belief will change as society changes and new things are brought into it. From my perspective, there's three main components that go into making a belief, both on a macro and micro scale. The more micro scale is going to focus on culture, emotions, and then social influences. And those kind of work together to create the framework through which someone's going to understand and interpret or perceive the world around them. And then from that framework, we can shape our worldview. And then that leads to the development of cognitive representations of an individual's thoughts about everything, themselves, other people. The foundational role in shaping and understanding one's own reality is definitely formed from those three things.
So what I hear you say about cultural, emotional, and social influences, I that kind of breaks down to me into like that nature versus nurture perspective. Now, again, I'm an IT guy coming into community psychology, so when I'm trying to understand and correlate these things, my perspective is often at that bigger second order level, and I can often miss that individual piece. So, what's your where do you land on how those like nature versus nurture really more cognitively influences behavior writ large?
Yeah, sure. But real quick, in case anyone's confused, I want to kind of define culture versus social because those
Mm.
sound super similar to me. So cultural influences are going to be like the shared worldview of which you're raised in, shared symbols, myths, or narratives, such as like historical events, religious parables, that kind of thing. And then social influences is more so going to be those uh, political nature or the social pressures of group norms. That's what I'm kind of getting at with that. And then back to your question of nature versus nurture. Um, Clinical psychology is going to tell you that belief is the mental state in which an individual accepts something as true or real. Usually, we don't need immediate proof. Um, Nature is going to be kind of the genetic makeup, those bends that we have with our, neural synapses, how they've developed to process information. Nurture is going to be what I just mentioned with the culture and social. And then we form assumptions based on those things and how it processes through our brain. And then as we process things, we're going to create mental shortcuts. And then that is going to give us our worldview, our beliefs.
Okay, I love that you brought up mental shortcuts. I think I want to circle back around to that, but I want to put my thumb here just a little bit, but I definitely want to spend some more time on the mental shortcuts piece of it. When I take that and extrapolate from that individual level and start bringing it up onto more of a community based, whether you're thinking small neighborhoods, whether you're thinking schools, your workplace, your
Right, that
families, all the way up to
exosystem.
yes, all the way up to the ecosystem where we're talking about entire countries. It really kind of strikes me how beliefs start at an individual level, and as people congregate around and build those tight knit social contexts around their cultural, social, or emotional, all of the above connections, how those then form into bigger, more I hesitate to use the word stereotypical, but these communities of thought that have shared assumptions, norms, and mental shortcuts that create this sense of community that allows people to bond even when they have never met that person before. So when I
Um,
think of communities like the military, for example, I imagine someone sees the rank, they see the uniform, they have shared understandings just based on that basis all by itself. Police officers, teachers, all of these communities built upon these shared norms despite not always having the same shared experiences.
right, right. So that definitely goes into like social cohesion and identity, where collective beliefs create the sense of unity. The whole thing of respect for elders, gender roles, what goes into community service, those all go together and bind individuals together, fostering the social cohesion, which is definitely needed for maintaining stability within a society. And it's hard for society to kind of keep those constant because there's always so many shifting parts and so many different personalities driving things forward, right? So
Mm.
society kind of balances those out with, governing systems. So public humiliation is a great tool. Talking about the military, they used to use that all the time. It's gotten a lot better with the whole like hazing stuff, 2011 happened, a lot of reform, but Um,
Some big reforms, yeah.
but there's that pressure from the system that says this is how we act, this is how we should act.
So that kind of leads me into like one great example, and maybe it's just because I've had Hamilton on my mind, but I think of the evolution of the rules around things like dueling, where it used to be socially acceptable to defend yourself, set up, post up, fire, and sometimes people died, and over time that went away as the belief structures around that changed. But I link that to the institutions that kind of have formed around and modify is the wrong way of phrasing that have grown with these beliefs and reshaped them as we've learned more about ourselves and about society. So the legal structures that influence our day-to-day behavior that continues to change and reform, perhaps slower than we'd like, but it is a constant that there is a response or reaction to large changes in people's acted upon beliefs for better and for worse. We think of some of the changes that have happened, again, for like dueling as an example of a way
Mhm.
we've realized life is a little bit more valuable than we may have gave it credit, perhaps more so than our pride, and how those beliefs have changed over time and taken different, how should I put this, different expressions that have become more sophisticated.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, dueling is still around. Uh, Texas is famous for its mutual combat law, right? People on social media like to make that a whole thing. Granted, there is a lot of stipulations to that if you actually read the code. Not that we're going to get into that, but you're right. Laws are definitely a thing that gets shaped by the society's beliefs. They're kind of a formalized way of enforcing those collective beliefs. And because they become enforceable, they become more likely to be respected and followed by members of society. Um, for instance, private property being sacred to Western culture, right? So people have those rights to their own possessions. Granted, state by state, but that shows you society on both the macro and micro, even though states are still technically macro. You see how it can shift by culture.
So, given all that, what do you feel is the I don't know what the what do you feel is like the greatest influence on a person's individual beliefs?
On a person's individual beliefs, it would have to be how they're raised. So, in the first 8 years of life is when you are most mentally malleable. That's just pure adolescent psychology, um, development. First 3 years, you're gonna choose whichever parental figure in your life that you're going to bond more with. Usually that's mom or dad. However, that can change depending on, environment. And then until age 7 or 8, that is when your belief structure gets like solidified more or less for the rest of your prepubescent years going into early adulthood. And then at your late teens, you're going to reevaluate things. So it's really how you nurture those and foster those beliefs. A lot of things are going to be influenced by, say, religion or theology within a household, right? So, using America as an example, just because that's where we are right now. Um, Christianity, real big topic. And then conversely, atheism, right? That's a real big divide. One family is going to raise their children one way within a religious structure. Another parental unit is going to raise their kids extremely, by the book. This is science. This is what we know, even if we don't actually know it. And then that child is going to, in turn, have those beliefs. Same things goes for politics. We had a lot of studies come out about that and, you know, the 2023, 2024 era with psychology of beliefs for the adolescents in like kindergarten who had very hot takes on politics simply because that's what their parents said.
Yeah, and a lot of that is actually, if I'm going back to mental shortcuts, I think, ooh, we haven't really talked about it, but I think this is a great time to talk about since we're talking about early childhood development and how those connections influence those beliefs and actions. We cannot ignore Ainsworth's attachment theory because beliefs
Mm-hmm.
are formed out of safety, in my opinion. The safety to express and learn and grow, the observation of what is happening in the world around you. And typically, if you're the more secure you are with the person you're attached to, whether it's a family member, whether it's a friend, whether it's a significant other, the longer that relationship is, the more weight one tends to provide that that influence that comes into determining those core beliefs and disruptions into the life where we start becoming insecure avoidant or insecure resistant. The difference being that insecure avoidant is when a child is indifferent to the presence of that caregiver or to that significant other, whereas insecure resistant is that the child is more anxious before separation and shows ambivalence or resistance to the caregiver upon the return. Uh, in those states, uh, how a child receives that information can heavily influence whether or not they trust what their caregiver is telling them or they distrust. And if that attachment is ever broken and we become disorganized, where there's just a lot of confusion and fear, that can result in a wild swing in behaviors, typically traumatic behaviors and responses, where one might lend themselves towards belief systems or decisions that, in rebelling against the caregiver that they no longer trust, leads them down towards radicalization or can lead them towards other behaviors where we see when individuals are radicalized and become proxies for terrorists or when they act out in criminal ways, how that influence is so shaped by trust in the people and the experiences that they're giving. How we observe the world is so much a response to attachment to the people and places that we exist in. And then I think from that grows that sense of how you bring all that in and how it all kind of bubbles up. The kind of social influences you keep, the kinds of beliefs that develop from that. I think that is, a person will represent or display, I should say, those belief structures and form their communities around them with other like-minded individuals, which can have some concerns in echo chambers, but also could be really, really good ways of helping understand the kinds of peer influences and social conformities that are going to be effective in shaping a growing community or a growing society, and also could be effective reinforcers of positive behaviors, positive belief structures, and hopefully deterrence against negative as connective tissue. That human thing to want to always be social and connected around some group of people that we believe in helps keep us bounded together. Hopefully, I'm not. How about I go too all over the place with that one though? Because there's so many different ways that trust, I think, impacts our belief structure, and
Yeah.
to me, that seems like a core part of this whole conversation.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure attachment theory was developed by John Bowlby, I think that is.
Yes,
British
it was
psychologist.
yes in the 60s or 70s, I think. It was a couple of them that
Yeah,
kind of worked together on that.
sounds about right. Um, and then you also mentioned change and how that can play a big role in like the psychology and then the future like actions of someone, right? So just like to hit on that a little bit, and then circling back to the mental shortcuts, the brain is a very complex piece of uh, organic machinery, so to speak. And its entire purpose is just making sense and navigating the complex world that we have around us. And to do that, it creates these shortcuts and tries to maintain a level of homeostasis or balance kind of like a thermostat in your room is always trying to keep you at the temperature you're supposed to be.
I like
And
that.
when when there is just a offset or a challenge to our belief system, the demand goes through the roof, and that makes it work essentially overtime to try and figure out a way that it can make these two beliefs that don't exist together exist. And that gets into a state of cognitive dissonance, which will probably present physically as anxiety, stress. Your fingers might start peeling. You're probably going to get less sleep until your brain can figure out a way to make those beliefs exist together. And it will either ignore one of the beliefs or you'll have to change a belief. And we don't like that because it's very uncomfortable. Um, a Dr. Lewis did a whole essay on that in 2018, and he kind of went through and stated how the social dimension of belief and framework makes it very efficient for us to have these shortcuts. But because we have the shortcuts, proving ourselves wrong challenges our faith, so to speak, our intuition. It can literally shatter us. And that's kind of, he postulates a evolution system that makes it so that we can all work together and we'll just believe what the previous generation told us as true because it worked. And so there would be no danger in changing the process.
Oh, that explains why bureaucracies happen. It's like entrenched in our cognitive domain. But okay, so you did bring up the faith word, and I know this is like this is definitely more in your wheelhouse than mine. So let's bring it up because I think that we can't talk about belief without talking about its relationship to faith. So kick us off. How
Sure,
are
sure, sure.
faith and belief connected?
Belief in religion is a little bit different than just the scientific. It's not so much intellectual ascent, but a soul-driven adventure, so to speak. It encompasses a wide range of perspectives and practices that provide individuals with a framework for understanding existence, morality, and the universe. At its core, belief in theological terms often involves faith in a higher power, God or gods, um, who are thought to be responsible for the creation and governance of the world. These beliefs are typically articulated through sacred texts, rituals, epic poems, traditions that have been passed down through generations. In many religions, these texts serve as moral and ethical guides, outlining the principles for how adherents should live their lives, treat others, seek spiritual fulfillment, those types of things. Religious belief also provides a sense of community and identity. For many, religion is not just a private matter of personal faith, but it's a communal experience that involves participating in shared rituals, festivals, ceremonies. I think most of us understand that. Um, these practices foster a sense of belonging that can provide the emotional support and network of social connections that humans need. So it's really good for that as well. Belief in the religious sense can offer comfort, hope, particularly in times of suffering and uncertainty. That's why, looking back in history, like 9/11, we saw a major revival in, say, the Christian community. Many find solace in the idea of an afterlife or the presence of a benevolent deity who has a plan for them and their lives. Um, it provides a sense of meaning, helping individuals to navigate life's challenges with a sense of resilience and optimism. You know, those nice little buzzwords in there. Uh, However, religious belief is not without its complexities and controversies. It can sometimes lead to conflict both within religious groups, especially when interpretations of, say, I don't know, sacred texts or something differ or when religious laws clash with secular ones, because there would never be any countries where that happens. But the diversity of religious beliefs around the world reflects different cultural, historical, and philosophical backgrounds, making the study of religion an amazing time when you put in the legwork. It shapes worldviews, moral values, and the ideas of fulfillment in different places around the world. So, theological belief is basically a transformative shaping not only of an individual's understanding of the world, but their eternal purpose. Of course, that's all based on our own metaphysical subscription, whatever that may be.
Oh my God, every time. I love how you phrase that.
I mean, metaphysics is basically spirituality. Um, and it just is all encompassing for no matter what you believe, even if you're atheistic.
Hey, that's a belief though.
Mm-hmm. It's why metaphysics is the best.
I hope they get to sit on your PhD board for that one.
Not yet. That's a ways off.
All right, so we have these metaphysical subscriptions. We have guiding forces, and we have trust. Seem to be the kind of the core pieces. And provided that they don't clash, because we kind of talked about that before, we can avoid those kind of George Orwell 1984 doublethink situations. So one thing that I think we can all agree is our brain does not agree or does not agrees to not think about contradictions and challenge assumptions because of those mental shortcuts. We just want it to be easy and straightforward. We want to have things that we can trust and fully believe in that exist beyond us.
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't have a specific metaphysical subscription, there are probably things that you just as an individual you accept without uh, without fighting. Like I may not have a specific theology that I prescribe to, but I certainly do believe that there are forces far beyond my mere mortal comprehension from which guide and influence the forces around us. Some might call that just physics. I like to think that there is something more to it and that you can prescribe whatever you like to attach it, but those are all these kind of personal homegrown beliefs, some of which are more systematic than others. But the act of having belief, the act of having faith in something greater is, I think, something uniquely human.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, we can't ask animals, hey, what do you think about this? We haven't leveled up to that level of technology yet. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Work in progress.
Uh, but for sure, people want to believe that there is something more, and that is definitely a realm of psychology that is still yet to be explored. Um, Obviously, we're working on it. That's the entire purpose of philosophy is to find new science. It's that searching for wisdom that we always want to find. That's part of what makes humans amazing is because they always want to discover something. And when we discover that, one of our beliefs doesn't match, well, good news, good news. We have a nice philosopher that taught us a method to deal with that. If you take any 101 intro to philosophy courses, you'll talk about Descartes. One of his postulates that he brought forth was to imagine your mind as a basket full of apples. Each apple is going to be a belief. You take out each apple, examine it closely. If it's good, you keep it. If it's dirty, got worms, molded a little bit, you toss it out. That way you don't mix in the bad with the good. And also it gives you a method of sorting so that you don't have any of that cognitive dissonance that causes you stress. And all that to say is critical thinking is a great thing. It's a great tool. It helps us be amazing.
All right. I see what you did there. So let's talk about critical thinking. Let's talk about that a little bit. In today's hyper information age, where there's no longer that lag delay of beliefs being developed from just childhood, adolescence, adulthood, largely formed in, schools or your work groups or through parent-child relationships. Now it's in your pocket. Now it's everywhere you look. When we entered this information age, we've created this super highway of data where you can now be directly connected to the fire hose of information that the internet has to offer, all of humankind's knowledge in one place, right in your pocket, sometimes on your wrist, soon in your eyes. And the idea that there's no longer this boundary, these guardrails, which allow us to have time to take the space to really be introspective on our beliefs we're constantly receiving information, does make it incredibly challenging, in my opinion, to address the concerns of critical thinking with respect to having the time to digest the information that we're given and avoid things like echo chambers. Social media is an incredibly powerful tool for communication. It's also an incredibly potent tool for misinformation and disinformation. It's an incredibly potent tool for having uninformed opinions that people take as fact. It's an incredibly powerful tool for sharing simple messages that two different communities can look at and draw different messages, and that can be used to determine if you're in or not. The language that we use as adults is different from the language that our children use, and even within child circles and peer groups, language shapes and reforms faster than I think it has ever in history.
Oh, for sure. Everything's just coming at us extremely quickly. And if you watch the news 24/7, that's the best way to stress yourself out, right? Same thing with all of these very engaging algorithms that just pull us in, they shove information at us. Now you got different ones for pushing history information at you in the same short form media that we've all come to know and love. We've got um, ones that are for giving you highlights of books. We've got ones for any niche. If you want to learn a hobby, there's short form media to tell you tutorials. Short form tutorials. That's an insane idea to me, but hey, if it works for you, great.
Wiki
Um,
how it out.
exactly, but in video format. Um, and even with the long form media, everyone's got a podcast like us. So there's all this information out there for us to ingest and digest. And what ends up happening is we just take it in, and now that's our belief because it got to us first. Look back at history, you see the same thing with propaganda. For instance, the Cold War era, Russia's pushing out their propaganda, US is pushing out their propaganda. Everyone's believing both sides have this amazing technology that maybe one has, maybe neither have, right? And then at the end of the Cold War, you see who was telling the truth more, who was telling the truth less, kind of what's going on there. And that's why we need that critical thinking to reflect, take a beat, not have information thrown at us, and just sort through what we've heard and, you know, qualify its accuracy with what we observe around us in our actual physical world and not our digital world. But maybe that's just the boomer in me.
Well, we can grow beyond our boomerhood and let's see if we can't drive this and find a positive here that doesn't leave those behind us scrambling to figure it out themselves. How can we use the structure of modern society to help reinforce a healthy belief structure? Like I I want to be real clear. I especially with respect to propaganda, I don't want to be in a position or a situation where it feels like I'm censoring people's beliefs or that they don't feel strongly supported in the right to express how they feel and view their critical thinking skills. But I want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to recognize when their beliefs are potentially being manipulated, whether it's by individuals or organizations with financial interests. I am especially keen at looking at influencers because many do disclose their financial relationships, but some don't. Some are all about the outrage culture. And I'm concerned about how some of those can be perceived as trusted sources that might change if individuals were more aware of why or what the financial incentive for developing and generating this outrage is. When people consider sponsorships, when they consider integrity, when they consider the intent behind messaging, how can we better equip ourselves to form and maintain critical thinking and really sift through all this information and avoid getting stuck in echo chambers just because someone resonates with our existing beliefs or feels genuine to our evolving belief structures?
Sure. I mean, honestly, the cheesy answer is just go out there and make new friends that don't think like you. But the realistic answer would just be make sure you're fact checking the information that you're ingesting. Make sure that, like, when you regurgitate information, does that information you're regurgitating make sense? It really is about just taking a beat, reflecting, understanding what's going on around you and having that situational awareness. And everyone has the ability to have that situational awareness, right? That's not a, oh, that's only for smart people. Oh, only dumb people don't have situational awareness. That's a everyone thing, right?
This is where we go into planting apple seeds, get better friends, plant apple seeds, grow an orchard.
Yes. Plant apple trees, know your apples in your head, be Johnny Appleseed.
Okay, I think that's a let's do a little review here, see where we're at, because we've covered a lot of ground here today. We have hit the definition of belief. We've talked about the social context that form and shape it. We've looked at how beliefs are formed from adolescence, from early childhood through adolescence through adulthood. We've also then kind of looked at how it interconnects and relates with faith. Then we've addressed some of the modern age issues in our current information age. And I think we've provided a couple of opportunities for people to really reinforce their critical thinking skills and push through some of the difficulties that we're seeing with some practical and reasonable examples. Think there's anything else we missed that we want to make sure the audience leaves off with today?
No, I think that's about it. But, you know, all of these conversations, there's never going to be a end. There's always more to talk about, right? It's all
That's how I
about
want to keep.
just, what was it?
Like it's about keeping our minds full, right?
And providing perspective, Mr. Corny,
I couldn't help it.
to, you know, figure out where we are, where we might be, and where we should be.
And where we have yet to go. So I'm Terrence.
I'm Roman. And say, if you liked what you heard, give us a like and a follow. If you have any questions or topic ideas you'd like us to discuss, go ahead and leave us a comment. You'll see in our description our website. We plan to do one episode every month. They're going to release on the third Sunday of every month. And it'll just be a time for us to sit back, discuss, and have a wonderful time. Thank you for joining us for Mindful Crossroads, where ideas meet and transform.
That was good. I like your endings. You can just cut off all the corny stuff. Just use yours.
No, I'm definitely going to keep that.